Hello there. My name is Regina Wilson, and it's a pleasure to moderate this community conversation where we'll discuss the COVID-19 infant and toddler vaccines, harm reduction best practices, the importance of testing, and the latest updates. This conversation is being presented by Vaccinate All 58 and California Black Media. Through the pandemic, the state's COVID-19 awareness campaign has executed community conversation comprised of medical experts, community advocates, education administrators, personal testimonies to provide updates and vital informative forums for discussion. As we near 2.5 years since we've entered the pandemic, public health officials continue to monitor COVID-19 community levels at the state level, as well as in community levels, to protect the health and well-being of Californians. We want to keep our schools safe for in-person instruction and keep California's economy thriving. We're also dealing with many things that tend to make us feel like we have no control. But COVID-19 is something that we can do a part of to help prevent the infection and protect our families and communities. So today I'm excited to share that for the next hour, we have two dynamic health professionals on the front lines of this subject matter and who understand the importance of the conversation like these. Jennifer A. Miller is a pediatrician from San Francisco Bay Area, and Dr. Kirstin Gates is a family practitioner in Sacramento. Before we jump into the conversation, let me just take a little couple moments to make sure you know a little bit about our doctors. So Dr. Jennifer Miller is a pediatrician from San Francisco Bay Area. She is a partner at the East Bay Pediatrics. She is from Los Angeles, but lives in the Bay Area and has lived there for over 20 years. She's trained at the Children's Hospital, Oakland, and has been caring for children and adolescents since moving there in 2000. She has worked in the school-based health centers, in the hospitals of pediatric and teen clinics. She's committed to mentoring and supporting high school, college, and medical students of color. Dr. Miller is a faculty at UCSF, Oakland, and San Francisco, and is involved in the education and medical students and with students in residence. She's a board member of the Girls Inc. of Alameda County, and has worked actively with the American Academy of Pediatrics regionally and nationally. She's actively working to help vaccinate all 58. Dr. Kirstin Gates is a graduate from George Washington School of Medicine and Health Sciences. In 2011, after completing her undergraduate at Xavier University in Louisiana, whoop whoop to my HBCUs. She completed her medical residency in Connecticut, and she is board certified in family medicine. She and her husband have a 2-year-old daughter and are originally from Chicago, Chi-Town. She's begun working as an adult primary care provider at Kaiser in Elk Grove in 2018. She's currently co-leading the African American Health Disparity Strategy team for the Kaiser South Sacramento region. And she was named a Sacramento Magazine Top Doc in 2020 and awarded with the Kyron J. Phil Fitzpatrick Community Service Award, Kaiser Permanente South Sacramento 2021. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. That was a lot of a mouthful, so I want to give you guys an opportunity to say a few words to our guests.
Well, I would just say thank you so much for having us. Regina, I'm really glad to be here with Kirstin, Dr. Gates, and I'm happy to get the word out to our families to remind them of the importance of vaccinating our children to keep us all safe.
I couldn't agree with Dr. Miller more. You know, it's interesting having this conversation. I woke up this morning starting to have laryngitis, got COVID tested for the first time. But I mean, I wasn't going to miss this. So I think I just want to say like how honored I am to be here. I'm going to hope my voice carries through, but it's such a joy to be with you guys.
Well, no, thank you so much. And, I just want to start with some frequently asked questions, I think, to spark conversation, because it's not every day that we get to have doctors like on call where we get to just kind of talk to them about the things that are really going on, the questions we might have, the things that we might be embarrassed to ask. But we can do here because this is like the girls getting to talk, and we get to talk on platforms where our communities are used to being able to have these conversations. So I want to just make sure that you guys know, feel free to jump in on any of these questions, because I think when we look at this from what people are thinking and what they may be asking, we want to be able to get as many different ways that you might say things that will help the listener or anybody tuning in, will help them. Maybe you're going to say it one way and Dr. Miller, you're going to say it another way. Sometimes, how it takes different people to say things. Like I think about my kids all the time. I will say things over and over again, and then my husband says it, and for some reason it clicked with him and it didn't it didn't click for them with me. So I hope that we can have this to be a very, enlightening conversation with two wonderful doctors. So, let's start with, obviously, people are hearing that COVID never went away, but I think because we're not getting those daily briefs that we were getting before, it's not on the forefront of people's mind. And so now we hear all about the different strands. So this question, Dr. Gates, for you, but feel free, Dr. Miller, to chime in. What is the BA? Is it BA.5 variant? Is this a new strain? Like, what is it?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I've joked that once we start getting technical language like BA.5, we're starting to get into the weeds of this starting to be a more scientific conversation. But essentially what BA.5 is a variant of the Omicron variant. So most of us saw the extreme spikes that we had this past winter with Omicron. And what we've been going through is BA.1, BA.2, BA.3, BA.4. We're on BA.5 now as the predominant strain. So what we're seeing is the same illness, but a different version of that illness.
Okay. And so you said it's a different strain, same illness, but a different strain of that illness. And is that, would you say that stronger or more contagious? I mean, every time we hear this, we hear, oh, this one is more contagious and this one is more contagious. So help us understand that real, like, what's the real deal about the contagious part?
So I think a lot of us have heard about survival of the fittest, right? I think that's the way you've got to think about these viruses and the different variants. They're trying to outsmart all of the things that we put into place in order to keep ourselves safe. So usually every time we have a new strain, it's more contagious. I think the key thing for us as physicians, the difference that we make is we question, is it more deadly? So I've been seeing some things in the news talking about BA.5 is worse than any other strain we've had before. And that's where I think it can be a little alarming. It is worse in the sense that it is much more contagious. Usually, I will say that the data that we have so far is that no level of protection has stopped people from getting the illness. Now, the vaccines are still very effective in keeping people from dying from COVID, but there's a difference between not dying from COVID and not getting it. It's kind of like we all have dealt with flu and colds. We're sick for a moment and then we get better. What we were seeing early in the pandemic is that people weren't getting better, that our hospitals were full. So BA.5 is definitely more contagious, but we are not finding that it's more deadly. So worse in regards to how many people can get sick, even if they're vaccinated, even if they've had COVID before, but not worse in the sense that we're not seeing the levels of death that we were with some of the earlier strains.
Okay. And, as you talk about this, once people are getting it, how are we seeing in terms of, how long does immunity last after you've tested negative for COVID-19? And I say this because I've also, I have never had COVID. I've never contracted it, but I've had a whole house full of people who did. And so I keep saying, they contracted it and we ended up taking a trip because we had a family relative pass away. So we went to Florida because we said, okay, the kids have already had it. So this is like the perfect time for them to go. I was going within the window. So maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it was a bad thing. It wasn't scientific. So tell me now, how long does that immunity last after a negative COVID-19?
So classically, we would say 90 days. That would be our answer. That's the difference with BA.5, is that we're not really seeing protection. So let's say that someone just recovered from BA.4, they could get BA.5 because it escapes immunity. So some of this, I usually tell my patients, the likelihood of you getting the same strain is extraordinarily low. So if what is circulating in the community hasn't changed, it's always interesting when we're in these shifts. So right now we're moving toward BA.5 being the predominant strain. So it's like if you got sick 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, BA.5 was not the predominant strain. So would you be vulnerable when BA.5 becomes the predominant strain? Yes, we are not finding that recent infection protects with this particular strain. So the key thing to kind of know, because then some people will often ask, well, how do I know which one I had? Is there a way that you can figure out what strain it is? Excellent question. Even we as physicians, we don't get that information. What happens is the positive COVID tests go to public health officials. They sequence it to know what's going on in the community at large, but not on a one-to-one individual name by name basis. So you almost have to guess about when you got sick and what was the most likely the strain that was going on. So particularly for this particular variant, I would not assume protection just as a safety feature, because we know that past immunization, past infection is not protective against BA.5.
So Dr. Miller, so does that mean that whenever people say, well, I just got it and I had the Omicron, so all the people who told me they knew what strand they had, they did not know what strand they had, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Not to mention the fact that public health department is not testing all those people that are testing at home and finding out their positive strains at home. They're not getting PCR tests, and those don't go to the public health department. So there's a lot of people that are being unsequenced and that we don't have the data on, which is a little disturbing.
I know. I mean, sometimes I wonder if we did that just so that we stop making people be so alarmed. But yeah, so I looked at that and I oftentimes say, please don't tell me. Like I have family members who will say, well, I think I had this strand. I don't think you know.
No,
so now
they definitely
I can officially say the doctors, the sister doctors have told and they have spoken. So thank you for clearing that up.
And it's interesting because my daughter had it early on. She's vaccinated, but also immunocompromised. So she was at a little bit higher risk. So she had it. And when she got it, she luckily the symptoms were very mild because of her vaccine. But the public health department asked, could they come test her because they wanted to sequence it. But I never found out what it was. I was never told what strain it was. And that was probably during Delta, I'm guessing. But I don't know. They never told me, and they told me they wouldn't tell me. So it was in my house. And like you, Regina, I thank God have never had it either. But my household has.
I will say, I sometimes believe that God is just sparing the moms because he knows that we need to be the ones to take care of it anyway. So that's what I'm sticking to. I'm kind of using my immunity that I have. Not that I won't get vaccinated, but I kind of say, God is just placing that on me because he knows that moms have to do all the work when they get sick. So anyways, I'm getting off script here. So, do you guys believe that we'll eventually need a booster every year? Is that where
it's looking that way? I mean, one of the questions is, when will we be done with this pandemic, right? And I think ultimately an endemic state, I can tell you when is COVID season. The same way if you ask me, Dr. Gates, when is flu season? I can tell you, okay, this is when we expect the rise. Things stay essentially stable. We're not seeing surges in hospital numbers. but they're even planning on possibly creating a booster specific to the Omicron variant. So the hope is that maybe this fall, that there may be a different shot than what we've been getting. Up to date, we've been getting another dose of the same vaccine. And so once we're seeing the level of what we call immune escape meaning like you got vaccinated, but you still got sick. Case in point, my voice, right? So it's like, look, I got all my shots, I got my booster, but look at China, right? Like, so this is what we're seeing, right? And so that is why that is being hypothesized for possible October. But I think even though it hasn't been an official statement, I think most of us in the medical community are expecting that we will end up doing this on some kind of systematic basis. And the question is going to be, what is that? Is that once a year like the flu shot? Do we need it twice a year? Once COVID becomes clearly endemic, when we clearly know the pattern, that'll dictate how often the vaccine is needed.
And the reality is we sort of have done it every 6 months. And so we're kind of saying we'll be lucky if we get it once a year. Because right now, if you think about when you got your vaccines and when you got boosted, you got them every 6 months. And for us, I'm not over 50, but I consider myself high risk. We got another booster. So we'll hope we can get it down to just one. And in a dream world, it'll be flu shot and COVID vaccine together. So we only have to get one shot. That's what I'm hoping for.
Well, I was asking, could they do the nasal? Because I'm telling you, I think you'll get so many more people. A pill, a nasal. I'm telling you, you'll get people to pop them and snort it up their nose. I mean, I just know it will happen.
It's just not as effective. It's not as effective. That's the hard part.
I know. In the medical field, I know when you guys go in there, you're probably like, the shot portion is whenever it's just like, dang, this is the best way, but not for the people. No, I'm joking. People get through it. But so if we're looking at this every year, are we looking at kids every year? Are we looking at seniors every year? Like, or just everyone? Because obviously, like right now you have kids and they're going to go through a series, and then you have people like my father who has ALS, and he's been told, you have to kind of go back and back and back and back. And so he's had much more boosters than everybody else in my kind of orbit. So do you think it'll be like that, or we just don't know yet?
I don't think we know, but I would imagine that kids are going to be just like the rest of us, that if adults are going to have to get it, kids are going to have to get it too. It's just that the littlest ones have been the last edition. So they're a little bit behind. So they're just getting their primary series, but I suspect a booster will be in order for them 6 months or so after they get it. And by that point, it'll probably be determined whether we are going to have to get it once a year or twice a year. And I think kids will follow suit.
All right. So, and I know you kind of talked about this, Dr. Gates, a little bit about us. Are we officially in an endemic? I mean, have we, from both of what are we in the endemic? I know that I feel like I've heard people say it. I had to look it up whenever I really didn't realize, like, I was like, okay, we're in a pandemic and endemic. And I'm like, wait a second, does that mean it's going to be the end? Can you explain it for our guests?
Yeah, so endemic is not a statement about the severity of illness. One of the examples that always gets brought up is that malaria is endemic in parts of Africa, but there are hundreds of thousands of people who die from it every year. But the key thing is that the rates and the impact on a population is steady. So there are not these huge swings and flares. I think all of us keep seeing the public health graphs that show, there's a COVID spike. And so that's the thing that you really would start to not see is when we get to an endemic level. And there's no official rule as to when that is. No one actually has any firm definition about when there is an endemic state. But the key thing is that there are not these peaks and valleys that we're currently seeing. That's the thing. And so are we in an endemic state? I think this BA5 has proven that we're not.
So and this is not to get any of our listeners, anybody who's tuning in scared, but does that mean that like we really shouldn't be going back to life as normal in that same vein? And this is going to get us to that next topic about wearing masks on both sides, from kids to adults. You know, Dr. Miller, let's start with you. Should we, you know, because we're saying we're endemic, or however you kind of just describe this, you know, should our kids still be wearing masks at school or in summer programs? And then should adults, you know, Dr. Gates, be wearing masks? I mean, you know, Dr. Miller, let me go ahead and let you chime in on that.
I still recommend it to my patients. I still wear a mask faithfully when I go places. And so I figure if I do it, then I'm going to recommend it to my families and my patients. My daughter's in summer camp and she wears a mask. Although she said to me today, it's really interesting, Mom, only about 75, there are about 25% of the kids wearing masks. 75% of the kids are not wearing masks and they're inside. So I think the numbers, you know, as Dr. Gates said, the numbers are not going down. They are going up. They are rising. BA5 is very contagious. And I know from my practice, I'm seeing a ton of COVID cases, like everybody, oh, sorry. I hope you can still hear me. Everybody has COVID, not thankfully, but all of the patients, they all have it. And so I just feel like as we see numbers this high, how can we not wear masks? So I recommend it. I think kids should wear masks if they're indoors. If they're outdoors, they can be okay. But I do think they should have masks on.
And Dr. Gates, what about you? How do you? Because obviously, I think we've been allowed to be free, and then it's like get back on that mask, and it's 110 degrees in certain parts of the state right now, so you're sweating and slobbing. Tell us what we should be doing as adults.
You know, I couldn't agree with Dr. Miller more. I think some of this almost requires a pre-pandemic mindset. So if I walked into an exam room where someone was coming in with cough and cold, I would put on a mask and the patient would have a mask. It was the simple desire to try not to spread illness. It wasn't even about the fact that it's a pandemic or a mandate. So there's just like some simple protections that I think are critical and just kind of make sense. And so it's inconvenient, but especially with BA5, not wearing a mask is kind of asking to get it, if that makes sense. It means that, you know what, I don't really care if I get it. I don't really care if anyone in my family gets it, because again, immunization, past infection, they're not protected, right? So if you're at that state to where you don't care about getting infected and there's nobody else who you're trying to protect, then, you know, that would be the only situation to where not masking in this environment would be would correlate with your behavior. You know, there's this word called cognitive dissonance, and as a primary care doctor, I see this every day. It's when you say you want something, but you're doing the complete opposite. So that, if to not wear a mask and not want to get infected with BA5 being the predominant strain would be cognitive dissonance in this case.
Right. Well, you know, I think we have oh yeah. See, now you preaching, you taking us to church and you gonna make us all feel bad. And I'm gonna go buy everybody I know a box. I'm gonna send them just on Amazon, sending them a box of a mask. I mean, even when I said we did a Disney World trip, and just as a short story, we were on the flight and most of the flights went really well until we got to one flight where they couldn't find a pilot, but they packed us all into an airplane like sardines. And we're like, well, we can't find a pilot. So we had to sit on a flight for an hour. I was so nervous about getting COVID. I mean, what do you say about people traveling right now, coming back and forth? It's the summer. So, you know, I've seen people on Facebook. I see them in Europe. I mean, I was at Disney World, or I was in Florida. So what do you say to like the traveling folks right now? Like, what should we be saying to our friends whenever they come back or as they're traveling so that they're practicing stuff, but we're not taking and spreading whatever variant is in Florida or Europe or wherever you went to? What should we be doing, to be able to make sure that we're being safe, bringing it back when we come back home and around in community and with our loved ones?
I would agree with what Dr. Gates just said, is wear a mask. I can't tell you how many families are in Europe, have been in Europe, have called me from Europe and have said, I have COVID. I have COVID. I have COVID. We came back. I have COVID. I have everybody that's traveling. So I say, and they say to me, well, nobody wears a mask in Europe. And I said, well, you better wear one unless you want to come back with COVID. Because like she said, like you said, Regina, it is an inconvenience to wear a mask. It is much more inconvenient to have COVID. Much more inconvenient to have COVID. You're home for 10 days at least, and you might even really be sick. So just put on the mask. Every time I fly, I'm amazed. I just had to go to Minneapolis for a conference and I flew there and back, and virtually the entire plane has no mask. And I kept my mask on the entire time. Walking through the airport, they have no masks, So it's just, I'd say you wear a mask. And if you try, don't say you can't travel. I think you can travel if you want, but travel safely and travel and wear masks for your kids and for yourselves.
Dr. Gates, I know you're probably saying the same thing, but you're like, just wear a mask. You're like, and is there a mask that you prefer? Do you prefer the KN95? I think I have some of those KN95s that we wear, or the white ones with the blue. I mean, are those less likely to kind of help you? I've always thought, like, look, if I sneeze, if anything, I'm only getting it to myself, so I'm imagining it's not going to anyone else. But is that kind of, is there a particular mask that we should be wearing?
The N95s are more effective. I mean, essentially, when we use an N95 in medical care, we actually have to get fitted for it. And it has to be like this airtight seal. Very uncomfortable. So, I mean, the ones that people purchase over the counter, the way that they're formed, they do create a tighter seal against the face. So if somebody was saying, okay, like what's the best mask that I could use, then yes, the N95, K95s are slightly more effective than kind of your just cover your cough mask. So the reality, and this is always kind of like the thing that is a little bit interesting, part of the key reason why masks help is because it's capturing the droplets from the person who's infected, right? So like where we see the most benefit from a mask is when we're all doing it, so that in case we're in the early stages of COVID and don't know it and happen to sneeze, or, we happen to, have a mild cough, but, like, I don't have a fever. I think this is just allergies. So often people won't know in the very, very first days that wearing a cough is also protective to your family. And so there's this kind of twofold. But in regards to protection for yourself, yeah, KN95, N95s would be better. KN95s are just produced overseas. That's kind of the key difference. They do appear different in regards to how they're manufactured, but similar principle of trying to create a tighter fit on the face.
So, and I know that this might, leads me into, on the whole mask conversation, but do you think at this point, with the case numbers rising in the cities that you both live in, and obviously I'm hearing about the things that are in LA, and I'm not hearing about in every county, but do you see us going back to a statewide mandate, or do you think that there may be, county mandates that are on the way because of how high these cases are increasing?
It's a complicated answer because it's twofold. There's one about what would be beneficial, and then there's another about what do you think will be followed, right? And so the public appetite for mandates and limitations, I think the legislative side of this, not necessarily the health side of this, but the legislative side of this is kind of an acknowledgement that people are tired. Dr. Miller said exactly right. And I can't tell you how many times I have this conversation that you should quarantine for 10 days. Medically, it doesn't make sense to quarantine for 5. Like, a virus lasts 10 to 14 days. They cut it down from 14 because they assume that your first 4 days, maybe you didn't have any symptoms. So we'll do 10 days from start of symptoms. There is nothing that has changed in medicine or science, but what has changed is the likelihood that employers would support being out for 10 days. And so you're kind of moving to the same kind of just common sense knowledge that we do for flu, right? So if somebody has the flu, they would possibly be spreading it. Again, the symptoms can last 10 to 14 days. But we usually say, if you don't have a fever, you can come back to work.
Right.
Right. And so we're moving toward that, not because the health mandates it, but because the implementations we were using end up being non-sustainable for our society to still function. And so that in and of itself is somewhat of an admission by the CDC that we're starting to weigh multiple things, right? So it's kind of like in medicine, we always talk about risk benefit, right? And so there are some things that may be beneficial in one area, but detrimental in another. And depending on that balance, you may start to shift your recommendation if the detriment becomes too untenable to deal with.
So it's basically what you're saying is the employer said, y'all got to get to work because we got money to make. No, I'm joking. But they're like, we got clients to serve. If you had a whole staff out, I guess it wouldn't work for you either. So that becomes a bigger problem and you're not able to see people. And you say, just wear a tight fitted mask and don't pass it on to the people when you're seeing it. Is that what that's what we're seeing here. And I think that's part of the thing that's kind of confusing for people, right? Because they're saying, why do I have to go to work sick? And I get it. It's a balance. And I don't know if I know early on people equated this to being like the flu. Do you see it? And Dr. Miller, you kind of said it, like maybe there'll be, a vaccine where it's a combination. Are we seeing that it can turn into that, where this flu was deadly, I guess, too, for some people, it can be deadly. Do we see it being in any way different, but like a cousin, like similar?
In the sense that it's so widespread, in that sense, I would say, sure, it's kind of like a cousin, but they're different viruses. They affect large populations, large swaths of the community. So in that sense, they're similar. I'm sure it's a pipe dream, but I would like to have one shot for both viruses, but it would be nice. But yeah, no, I don't see it happening. But it affects us all. It widely affects us all. So in that sense, they're sort of similar.
Right. Okay. And so, and since we're on this, Dr. Miller, I'm wondering, obviously the new, we're thinking about new processes and approvals. We're approved for under 5 right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Ages 6 months to 5 years.
So that people and parents that may be looking across this, what's the process for vaccines to get approved, and specifically infants under 5 years old in California?
So it isn't necessarily state specific, it's nationwide, but they go through 3 rounds of clinical trials where they are aggressively tested and checked for efficacy and for safety. And once they've passed those 3 rounds of trials, the FDA reviews the data very thoroughly, very completely, to make sure that it's safe and effective for the age group in consideration. And in this case, since it's a pandemic, the FDA granted emergency use authorization. So it fast-tracked it a little bit. It didn't cut any corners. The same level of trials went through. The same rigor of the data was there. But the FDA granted emergency use authorization. And then once that happened, then the CDC reviewed it and made its recommendations for children. And the public health departments in California signed off on it so that it could be given to children aged 6 months to 5 years.
Okay. And so, I think this is the question for the parent, right? Are COVID-19 vaccines safe for 6 months and older? Like for those parents that are new parents, their kids are getting a series of shots right now. And I mean, at 6 months, I can't think of how many they've gotten, but obviously they probably have gotten quite a few
Several.
already. They've
Yes.
already gotten several sets of things. So what would you say to parents that are, new parents and they are, concerned or want to understand, should they be, doing this for their kid that's 6 months right now?
What do I say? Because I just had these conversations yesterday and I'll have them again tomorrow, is that absolutely, I recommend it, that the vaccines are safe and effective for kids 6 months and up, and particularly 6 months to 5 years in this round, that they're safe and that they work and that they protect them from getting more serious complications. They protect them from getting long COVID. They protect them from ending up in hospitalizations. They protect them from getting multi-system inflammatory syndrome. They protect them from ending up in ICUs and dying. And so that if we as parents, that if our job is to protect our kids, how could we not protect them by giving them the vaccine? We know that it's out there, it's widespread, everybody's getting it. And so if we know they're going to get it, we want to protect them from getting serious complications from it. So we have to vaccinate them. And it can be given with their primary series of other vaccines. So I had 6-month-olds in my office yesterday that I said, hey, get your regular vaccines and you can get your COVID vaccine at the same time here in my office.
So, and you struck something that made me want to bring Dr. Gates back into this conversation as we talk about long COVID as well. So, Dr. Miller, first with you, are kids getting long COVID? I mean, I know the beginning of the pandemic, whenever everything happened, things shut down. I looked at my kids, I went grocery shopping and I said, we're hunkering down in this house. I made my husband go get, I said, you didn't go get gas in the cars, like fill them up. I mean, literally, I don't know what I was thinking was going to happen, but I went to Costco. I mean, I had freezers full of food. We were able to stay in our house for at least 6 months without coming out. Kids didn't go to school, but then, you did see the daycare stay open. It was almost like they said, little kids aren't immune to this, but adults are. Kids are, for some reason, they're not getting sick. So what changed in that? And, are kids experiencing long COVID, or are we seeing kids really get COVID at the same rate as adults? And equally, are we seeing them have long COVID cases for the children's side? And then Dr. Gates, for you, I want to hear about, like, from an adult side, what long COVID is and, how it's playing out.
So we definitely see kids get sick. We definitely are seeing kids get sick, especially with Omicron. With Omicron, we saw the most kids get sick than we had seen. With Omicron, they were 5 times more likely to end up in the hospital and end up in ICUs. With COVID and now with Omicron, it's one of the top 5 leading causes of death in children. So definitely kids are getting sick. I would say on the front lines in my office, I'm not seeing a lot of long COVID, certainly in the young kids, but we do see it in some of the older kids. We talk a lot with the cardiologist about our athletes, our adolescents that we have to follow that have had COVID to make sure they don't have any effect to their heart. So we definitely see some long-term complications and we watch kids closely. They do get sick. They do get sick. They can get sick. They can get long COVID. There's another question you asked me. I forgot what it was now. Do you remember?
I will come back to it. I know that we'll come back to it. So, Dr. Gates, long COVID, I know we probably maybe we didn't explain what long COVID was. So maybe you explain what long COVID is and then tell us how you were seeing this play out in adults.
Yeah, so how we were mentioning before, you classically think your symptoms of your viral infection, you finish being ill and then you recover, you feel much like you did before you got sick. Your symptoms go away, you get back to normal. Long COVID, I think that the most common complaint is going to be fatigue. And there's something that's called exertional malaise, which translates to when you do kind of like simple daily activities, the level of tiredness you have to simply do simple tasks far outweighs the amount of energy that you actually put to do those tasks. So where we would consider it long COVID is when someone's a month out from the illness. So now when you're looking at it, like if you look at CDC reported data, it was slightly over 13% of people had long COVID symptoms at 1 month out from disease. So it's not like rampant, right? So this is not like 50% of people are going to end up with long COVID. And especially exactly what Dr. Miller was saying, this is one of the reasons why we vaccinate is like, yeah, somebody might be thinking, you know what, I'm young, I'm strong, I'm not going to die from COVID. I don't have any medical issues. I don't want this shot. Well, young, healthy people very much can get long COVID. And one of the things, if you're not worried about death, the protection against long COVID is one of the things that the vaccination can give. Where you have people, the highest risk for long COVID is patients who are hospitalized. So patients who are hospitalized, it was 30% of the patients who are hospitalized who have long COVID, compared to those who were not hospitalized being at 13.5% 1 month out, and then it was down to 3.5% 3 months out. So this isn't something that's like a lifelong diagnosis. Of course, we are learning more. There are still that 3.5% of people they represent real people. There are people who have gone on for more than 3 months with these symptoms. But I think that it's just important to put those numbers in perspective. Is the people who are hospitalized, and forgive my voice, I don't know why.
No, it's okay.
But the people who are hospitalized, the 30% with long COVID symptoms were 6 months out from their hospitalization. So it's just not comparable. And I think it really emphasizes Dr. Miller's point when parents are like, my kids are young, they're healthy, they lived through COVID for 2 years, they're still here. Why do I need to vaccinate them? It's because we want them to continue to be young and healthy when they recover from COVID, especially when we want to use every tool to our disposal to help protect ourselves and our loved ones.
Right. Okay. I mean, sometimes I was thinking like, well, maybe I did have COVID because sometimes I get exerted and I'm like, wow, but I just think it's my age. I don't know that it's that. So
And all the things on your plate as a mother
I think
and a
it's
working mom.
Yeah. But sometimes you get worried. Like you think, did I have COVID? Because I'm tired. Why am I tired today like this? But, I don't know that it's that. Dr. Miller, where can people or where, I know that we had vaccine clinics, pop-ups, all that kind of stuff around, but where can, infants under 5 get their vaccines?
Well, the first place is with your pediatrician. So or your family medicine doctor, going to see Dr. Gates or going to see me, seeing your pediatrician, seeing your family practice, seeing your internist. For the little kids, most of the time it's going to be those kind of clinics and medical homes. You can get them in pharmacies like CVS and Rite Aid, and Walgreens. However, most pharmacies don't vaccinate in kids under 3. They make you go to your regular doctor's office. So it is important that you check with your doctor. The other options is public health departments in each of the counties are still giving vaccines. So you can go to myturn.ca.gov and look for the closest place to get vaccinated for you or your child. And you can also check Vaccinate All 58 to look for more detailed information about where you can get vaccinated.
Okay. And what is the, I'm about to ask about dosage size, but is the needle the same? Because when I got my shot, I was like, I was really prepared for it. It was a lot for me to take in, but whenever they did it, I was like, okay, but that needle just seemed so a lot to take in at the time. I didn't cry. I was a big girl about it. And I think they even gave me a sticker, but is the needle the same? We're going to talk to the parents, like what they're used to seeing for their kids with these, as well as like the dosage, like, is it, what's the difference from the what kids are getting versus what the adults are getting?
So there's 2 vaccines that are approved for kids 6 months to 5 years. One is Pfizer and one is Moderna. Moderna is 1/4 of the dose of the adult dose, and Pfizer is 1/10 of the adult dose. Moderna is a 2-shot series. and Pfizer is a 3-shot series. So there's a little bit of differences between the two of them. Some families say, oh, well, I don't want 3 shots, so I'm going to come get Moderna. I saw your eyes light up when I said that. So because Moderna is 2 shots, you get it done faster than you do with Pfizer, but it's also a little bit more medicine. So people will weigh their options. It depends on the office. Some pediatric offices have all of the options available. Some only have one option available. I know in our practice, we just have Moderna. It's just sort of how we opted to do it. But there are 2 options. In terms of the needle size, kids needles are a little bit smaller than adults needles because their arms and legs are smaller. But most of them tell me it didn't hurt. And I felt when I got mine that it didn't hurt.
Yeah, I think I was anticipating that it was going to hurt. And I just was doing, you work yourself up, and then it wasn't, to be honest with you, whenever I did it, I was tired, went to sleep. And it was like, I went to sleep for maybe 2 days, but then I woke up and I cleaned my entire house, and I did it all in one day. It was so funny because I'm always getting distracted for other things. And I had all this energy. And so I said, they may want to tell people you might get a burst of energy that you weren't ready for. So I had energy. That was kind of my side effect.
It gave you superpowers.
It gave me superpowers to be able to clean. And I was like, okay. But are you seeing that kids are experiencing the same type of symptoms as adults? Like once they get it, are you getting calls back to say, the kids are vomiting or the kids are not feeling good? Like what should parents expect? Like if I was a mom and you're giving me multiple shots on multiple days and I don't know, or maybe I'm a parent who says, okay, I want to do this day and then do a different one a different day. What are you seeing in terms of response? Or what should parents look for so that if something were to occur, if something wasn't right, they know to call you to try to get back in right away and figure out whatever's going on?
I'll say the vast majority of patients have pretty mild side effects. So things like soreness in the leg, low-grade fever, fatigue, which is pretty standard for most of our patients. Most of our parents of six months old, they're used to be, those are the pretty standard side effects that happen after all of the vaccines that kids get. So for most parents, it's not a big difference. I find even in the older kids, the kids that are 5 and up, they really just talk about soreness in their leg, soreness in their arm. Same thing, low-grade fever, sometimes fatigue. I haven't seen a lot of the complaints that adults experienced. You're wiped out for 24 hours or you had diarrhea.
We're the big babies is what you're saying. No, go ahead.
I didn't say that. I would never say such a thing, but I know I felt worse than my daughter did when she got hers. She really didn't complain of side effects. So they're pretty mild, thankfully.
Okay. And,
and I would say, you asked me, what should they look out for?
Yeah.
I think parents should always let us know if they're having unexpected complications. So if it lasts longer than 24 hours, if, there's unexplained symptoms that they're not sure of, they should always reach out to their provider and let them know what's going on. The CDC has a lot of checks and balance systems. They have vaccine adverse effects reporting system where anyone can log in and kind of report the effects that they experienced after they got a vaccine. They also have VC. So a lot of times when adults know that they've gotten the vaccine, they will text you and check you, 3 months, 6 months after the vaccine to see if you're having any complications or side effects. So there's lots of checks and balancing systems for the COVID vaccine. So they're always watching, even though they're giving it so widely, they're definitely looking to know of complications and side effects.
That's really, really good to know. And so who would you say is not a good candidate if if there are infants and 5-year-olds that should not get it? Who are candidates to not get it? Someone asked me this question before, and I was hard pressed to come up with anyone that shouldn't get it. Certainly if you've had anaphylaxis to it before, you should get it with an allergist. You should definitely be seen under close supervision when you get it. But for people that are immunocompromised, they should get it. They're at high risk. It's more important. For people who have asthma, they should get it. As long as you're 6 months and up, you should get it. So I don't know if Dr. Gates could think of any
population that she doesn't give any to, but I have been hard pressed to come up with somebody that shouldn't get it.
Yeah, Dr. Gates, do you have anybody who should not be on the list to get it?
You know, it's such a great question. Back when the vaccines originally came out, I did a whole class on the vaccines. And if you go by what the recommendation is, they'll say, have you had any allergies to polyethylene glycol? Which basically nobody would know. Like, you would have almost been in like an academic study to know that you.
Well, I don't even know what that is.
even know
So
what it
I'm
is.
assuming that I'd be like, is that like Jello? Like, I don't even know what that is. Like,
It's not one thing. It's almost like saying, like, are you allergic to trail mix? And you're like, well, but you see what I'm saying? Like, polyethylene glycol it's an ingredient in the vaccine. And so kind of the same way people list ingredients, it's the one kind of like additive ingredient in the vaccine. So then you have to, by, you know, regulation, make sure that people know what's in it. And so if they've had a reaction to it before, that they wouldn't get it again. But realistically, to be able to isolate out that polyethylene glycol is what you had a reaction to, like,
it'd be difficult to do that.
yes, I will just say that we have not had a single situation in our adult and family medicine practice to where we've had kind of a legitimate concern about it without someone having had a reaction to it in the past, really kind of past reaction. Because this really, the ingredients are not something to where you would have known, you know, it's not a live vaccine. So I will just clarify this. We do tell people who have autoimmune conditions, who are on chemotherapy, who have had an organ replaced, that there are some vaccines that are not safe for them because it's a live virus. And so it can affect their immune system. But the COVID-19 vaccines, none of them that are available have that risk. So it doesn't have egg, it doesn't have iodine. So those common things to where we typically do have some patients, it doesn't have latex. So those classic allergies where we exclude certain vaccines for people, the COVID vaccines don't fall into any of those categories.
So I know that we hear, and this is from from parents, they've also read, and this was in the news, and I just figured we bring it back up to help clarify it again, but myocarditis and how that has played out with some, families. So how do we look at, that and I'm not really sure how it is. Maybe we should be explaining what it is first, and then looking at what they've seen, and or if there are new studies that have come out that have kind of said, no, there have been tweaks, and now we're not seeing this in patients anymore. The young, I forgot, it was like, I felt like they were saying in males that we're seeing it higher in males underneath a certain age group.
Yeah, so I'll definitely let my colleague kind of speak to it about for pediatrics, because I know that was something that was specifically looked at for the pediatric vaccines. In regards to that in young adults, which is where the questions were about myocarditis, pericarditis, we were seeing that more commonly, I believe, in Moderna. And so for patients who were going to have those concerns, we were recommending doing Pfizer instead. But truthfully, that hasn't been kind of a continued reported concern. So that is, one of the things that is like somewhat reassuring. And I guess what's a good way of putting it? I'll just explain this simply. Any vaccine is going to stimulate your immune system. And so if your immune system is overly stimulated, it can start to attack itself. So Guillain-Barré is what people hear about a lot when it attacks the nervous system. That wasn't a side effect seen with COVID vaccines, but attacking the muscle fibers of the heart would be myocarditis. Pericarditis is if there's a sac that covers the heart. If there becomes inflammation, fluid in that sac, that's pericarditis. So very similar, but it's an over response. So the immune system is over responding. So people who are young, who have robust immune systems, would be the most likely to have kind of an over response. But these are things that are not kind of unheard of with vaccines. Just this was the particular type of overreaction that was seen, but it is extraordinarily rare.
And I'll chime in a little bit too on that, since it affected us a lot in pediatrics, is that what they found is that COVID, the virus itself, causes myocarditis. And so there were more people that got myocarditis from getting the virus than getting the vaccine. And the myocarditis associated with COVID, the virus, was much more severe. And the cases of COVID, of myocarditis after being vaccinated, were all self-limited. So the patients got it, it was mild. Most of them didn't have to be hospitalized. They didn't have long-term complications. They didn't have heart problems. So it wasn't that the vaccine was giving them myocarditis. It was actually that the virus was giving them myocarditis. And that's much more severe. So that we found that the kids that were vaccinated were more likely to be better off if they got myocarditis than the people that got the virus and got myocarditis as a result of the virus. So we haven't seen it in little kids. It was just sort of the older adolescent male that this was found.
And so the kids that have like 5-year-olds or under, and I'm not sure if we are seeing this, when people start having, when our children start having allergic reactions, because, when I was going to school, everybody could eat peanut butter and jelly. When my kids started going to school, you can't have peanuts.
Nobody.
Like nobody can have peanuts. Like my daughter only eats peanut butter and jelly. And I'm like, I had to go to sunflower seed, which is just very gnarly in the way it smells, because you want to eat sunflowers and it just doesn't work the same. And so should kids that are, with underlying allergic reactions be vaccinated? Like, because are you saying like, so the parents don't have to worry in that regard, meaning that, kids with allergies, maybe it's peanut allergies, maybe it's, I don't know, because I don't even know how allergies like just come together. Do parents have to worry about that, or is this something that they don't have to worry?
They do not have to worry. So kids with food allergies, kids with environmental allergies are allowed to get vaccinated and recommended to get vaccinated. And like Dr. Gates said, that unless they've had the vaccine and had a profound allergic reaction to it, they're safe to get the vaccine. I've met one person who told me, an adult, that they had an allergic reaction to the vaccine, and she had anaphylaxis, she said. So she subsequently got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, did not have anaphylaxis, and did fine. But I have not had any kids at all have any problems. And I see a lot of kids with food allergies, like you said. everybody has them nowadays, unfortunately.
I mean, I'm trying to figure out what's going on, man. So, I know that we're coming close to our time, but I wanted to be able to, ask a couple of more questions and, just leave our viewing audience with just, being armed with the information that they need to stay safe and continuing on through this pandemic. But, do the current boosters work against the BA4 and BA5 variants? And anyone, both of you can answer that however you guys want to.
Well, I think Dr. Gates sort of talked about that in the beginning. Not really. I mean, that's what the virus is good at. They know that we're out here trying to stop it. And so it's continually making changes to try to avoid us. That's its job. That's the survival of the fittest. That's how it gets by. So no, it's not really responsive to our vaccines, which is why people keep getting sick. But we're preventing serious complications. We're preventing the bad stuff. We're preventing the long COVID. We're preventing the hospitalizations. We're preventing the ICU admissions, the multi-system multi-system inflammatory syndrome, those kinds of things. So we're preventing the bad stuff.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is, people come to see us for a cold all the time as physicians, right? And we are like, it's just a cold, you'll be okay. The vaccines help this be just a cold so that you'll be okay. The only, coronavirus is not new. Coronavirus was one of the things that was giving you your common cold for your entire life. COVID-19 was new, and it causing severe illness and hospitalization on the scale at which we saw over these last 2 years. That was what was unprecedented. So the vaccines don't stop you from getting a cold from COVID-19, but it does stop it from being this this devastating illness, exactly what Dr. Miller was saying.
And, probably final one question is to round us off. What should people do now going forward? Like once they view this and, once we start getting back into the, going back to school, we're done with traveling, how long should we quarantine if we have COVID? And what are some of the key things that you want to remind the listeners to just keep doing, even if some of the public health messages, or I call it, the mainstream life, is getting back and saying, hey, we're done with this? What are some of those things that you want to tell people to keep practicing, even if they're not getting those reminders like we were, earlier in the pandemic?
Well, the easy stuff, the low-hanging branches are wash your hands, stay inside if you're sick, wear a mask as much as possible. Don't be around other people if you're sick. Get vaccinated. I'd say those are the most important things that we can do for ourselves to protect ourselves. And in terms of the public health message, what I find as a provider is it changes area to area. Whether you vaccinate, like Dr. Gates said, whether you quarantine for 5 days, you quarantine for 10 days, and what your school wants and what test you have to get, and so I think as much as most of us feel like you should quarantine for 10 days, you've got to check what your school requires and what your job requires and what your public health department requires, in that particular county.
Well, can we get a doctor's note from you if we want to stay that extra 5 days?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any school will tell you can't stay home 10 days, right? You can't stay longer. Do not quarantine longer. They're just trying to get the kids back in school earlier. And I remember when they first came out with, 5 days, if your rapid test is negative, you can go back to school. And we were shocked. And we didn't think that people would test negative after 5 days. And miraculously, some of them do. Some of them don't, and so right. I think if you don't test negative, you got to stay at home. I've been telling my mother that, who unfortunately has COVID right now, is you got to stay at home all 10 days if you're still tested positive. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, I experienced it. And the 10 days was the 10 days. And we were staggered in our household. So it was really annoying.
Ooh, so it was really long.
It felt very long because the 10 days, for me, extended out for so long for everyone else. So, that was a lot. But Dr. Gates, what about you? What would you like to leave our listening audience to?
Well, Dr. Miller and I have been heralding the protection that you get from vaccines, and what we are seeing, especially I would say in our community, is some people were like, what, Dr. Gates, I got my 2, but I'm not getting that booster. And they really have a lot of hesitancy about continuing to engage. They'll take the news about BA.5 as like, see, this is going to mean I'm still going to get sick. But there are some medical conversations about whether or not you should consider someone who just got their first 2 shots as fully vaccinated. Like, we are now so far out that really the best protection is those who have been fully vaccinated and gotten their booster. So I do think that sometimes that subtle difference can get lost, because for so long, fully vaccinated has just meant that you got your 2 doses. But as the virus continues to mutate, this is the time. If someone hasn't gotten their booster and they're eligible, they definitely should do that. If they're 50 and older and they haven't gotten their second booster, this is definitely the time to do that. Because again, what we're trying to do is keep people out of the hospital. The reason why the boosters were recommended was because we found that those additional shots were needed in order to give the best protection to keep people out of the hospital. So I know people hate it. I know people don't feel great when they get it, but especially when we're dealing with strains that keep mutating, that keep being good at evading our defenses, you want to make sure that you have gotten the protection that we have found to be the best to protect people.
Well, I want to thank both of you for providing clarity on this important information regarding infant and toddler vaccines, and our harm reduction and best practices, the role that testing still plays. I know that, we talked about that. I appreciate your knowledge, your time, your candidness, and hope that, something you've said has impacted or triggered the light for someone like me or others in learning from our discussion. I want to send also a special thank you to those who took the time to listen to this panel. Please like and share in your network. As you carry on, we encourage you to continue to follow guidance provided by the public health officials from your area and keep up with the current rates so you're informed about COVID-19. Remember, COVID-19 vaccines remain the safest way to prevent hospitalization and death for everyone 6 months and older. Thank you so much. Be well and be safe.